Hello and welcome to the DVD Graveyard. Today I've got an episode of First Impressions, which I haven't done one in quite some time, to be honest with you. And the movie I want to talk about today is going to be Dolly from 2025, which actually got its theatrical release, and then of course its streaming release this year in 2026. I think last year it just came to a bunch of film festivals and stuff. And if you're not familiar with, what I've done these first impressions videos in the past. I'm not going to do a full-on review on this, just again kind of my first impressions watching the movie. It finally hit Shudder last night, which would have been the 24th of April, and I got to watch it. I was going to post something directly after, but we had a lot of really bad storms come through. We had a tornado come through. I think there's actually even supposed to be a tornado tonight, so I wanted to go ahead and get this out of the way, because right after that storm was over, I was like, all right, right before the storm started, I was like, I'm going to go watch this movie, and then the shit hit the fan. So I was like, all right, let's hunker down in the DVD room, and that's what I did. So like I said, this movie, it came out last year in 2025, or it was made last year, I guess I should say, and it came to theaters, it had a very limited run, early on in March. I think March the 6th was whenever it was supposed to be in limited theaters. I think it might have came to the theater here in my town. My buddy Kyle was talking to me about it. I think that's where he heard about it from. And but it was very limited. Like, I didn't even, and I go to the movies a lot, and I didn't even see, I didn't see a poster. I didn't see any trailers. I didn't hear anybody talking about it. It just went completely under my radar. And then when I finally did see something about this movie, it was one of those movies that I was like, damn, I need to see this. Like, and I was reading just a kind of a brief sort of synopsis on it, and I was like, this is something that I'm gonna like. This is a movie that I've been looking forward to. And I wouldn't say that it's just been my most anticipated movie of the year, but it's definitely been one of them, more or less. It's been one that I've really been looking forward to, and I'm glad to have finally. I actually got Shudder, had a Shudder free trial just to watch this movie, but I've been enjoying Shudder, to be honest with you. And so this movie, like I said, I was very pumped to watch this, and basically what it was kind of described to me as is almost like a kind of a throwback to like 70s era grindhouse type movies. And I mean, if you know me, that is right up my alley. That is stuff that I love. I love that kind of early to late 70s sort of kind of vibe, to a movie. That's something I really like, and I love that kind of, these old kind of unknown kind of grindhouse type movies. That's stuff that I really enjoy. So whenever I heard that, and a lot of people were comparing it to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, again, one of my favorite films of all time, it was definitely something that I, was interested in. It definitely caught my attention. This movie was directed by Rod Blackhurst. Now, I'm not super familiar with Rod Blackhurst. Like, I went through a lot of his movies, and there wasn't really any that I had seen. I know that he did direct the documentary over Amanda Knox, which was on Netflix. Now, I did not see that. I had planned to watch it, me and my wife did, but we never really got around to it. So I knew about that one, and I've heard it's really good. And I know that he co-wrote the film Night Swim, which I am not a big fan of. I was not sold on Night Swim. I did not care for it. Maybe we'll talk about that one at some point. I don't know. Like I said, I was not a big fan of that. So when I heard that he was attached to this movie, I wasn't. That didn't really just turn me off to the idea. I'm like, well, maybe. Maybe since this is kind of his own project, it could be good. Again, it sounded like something that I was really into. And of course, this movie stars I think I'm probably going to butcher her name. Fabian Therese plays Macy. She's kind of our leading girl in this movie. And Sean William Scott, of all people. Now, I was really surprised when I saw Sean William Scott in this movie. Not because I'm against Sean William Scott, but me personally, I've not seen him in a lot of stuff. And he used to be everywhere. But recently, I haven't seen him in a lot that I can recall off the top of my head. But I swear to God, every time, in the early 2000s, every time I would turn around, Sean William Scott was there. Like, he was in a movie every every other day, I swear. So I mean, I was very familiar with him, and they both do fine in this movie. I think they're both great, and I actually like the casting of Sean William Scott. Now I do have some issues with this movie, which I will address kind of at the end. I kind of want to just give like a sort of a brief plot synopsis, things I really liked about this movie, and then things that I did not like about this movie at the end. So I will be getting into some minor spoilers. So if you have not seen this, I do recommend going to check this out. On your own. Like I said, it is now on Shudder, but I think you can rent it also on Amazon Prime. And I can't remember, I think Apple TV, you can get it on there too. Well, let me kind of give the brief rundown of kind of what the plot synopsis is. So basically, Sean William Scott and Fabian Therese, Macy and Chase are their names. They're together, they're dating, and they go to this basically remote wilderness, and they're hiking and kind of hanging out and doing their thing, and he's planning on like proposing to her. They stumble upon this woman, this monster, in a way. I mean, which is Dolly, and she's the creepy looking woman that's on the cover of this poster that I've been looking at for a while now, and super creepy looking. And basically, she takes Macy hostage in the house and kind of more or less tries to mother her, tries to be her mom, more or less is kind of what happens. And then of course stuff kind of starts to kind of hit the fan, and we kind of go on from there. So that is sort of our brief, the brief plot synopsis I'll give. And going off of that, that is again the plot synopsis that I kind of read, going into it, or that's kind of what it gives you whenever you look it up on Google or something like that. That's really what it kind of gives you. And going off of that, this movie was more or less kind of what I expected. Like, I mean, it really kind of gave me what I knew was going to kind of come out of this movie. So the things I liked about this movie, like I said, this was a sort of a callback or like a love letter to a old school 70s B-movie grindhouse type film, and a lot of people again compare it to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think I've heard this comparison before too, but it reminded me, like, sort of my elevator pitch for this movie would be like, it's like a mixture between the film Barbarian from 2022, which was a great badass movie. I loved that movie. I really hope that it gets a physical release at some point. I know it's in the talks, but anyway, Barbarian from 2022, if you've seen that film, if you kind of know what the sort of happens in that movie, mixed with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's kind of that's sort of the more or less the elevator pitch that I would give for this. So I love the aesthetic, to this movie. I love it's got the nice looking film grain. I really like that, and it kind of goes to or it adds to the grittiness of this movie, which I really like. It's set. It has a really nice setting. I really like the rural area that this movie takes place in. That's really nice. I like the old house that Macy gets taken back to. All of this stuff is really working really well. Like whenever they come up on the creepy, all the dolls kind of hanging from the trees or nailed to the trees, and they're kind of unsure what's going on. And honestly, the plot, moving into this at the beginning is fairly, it's again, it's a very simple plot, but I mean, it's more or less believable. I mean, this movie is kind of grounded in a little bit more realism, kind of again like something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So that's something I really liked about this movie, is it does kind of feel like something that could actually happen, sort of in the far corners of a forest somewhere that nobody really goes to. It's just it had that kind of realism factor that I really enjoyed. There were a lot of scenes in this movie that were, it does have gore, most definitely, and there are some actually really good practical effects in this movie. And so there's just not like a ton of gore in this film, but what we do get is very nice. I like kind of what we do get in this for the most part. And I love the old house where Dolly lives. It's very spooky, and it's got this really, that's something that always kind of has, sort of creeped me out, is just that idea of this old, not dilapidated, but this old house just in the middle of nowhere where somebody lives on their own and they're doing these crazy, disturbing things, again, akin to something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I really like that, and I love the look of this house. She has all the rooms kind of set up, like the room that she keeps Macy in is really kind of creepy, with all the dolls and the kids' toys and stuff like that. The crib that she's puts her in. All this stuff is really really great. It's something that I do enjoy about this movie. I like our main sort of villain in this movie. Dolly, the titular Dolly, I guess you could say. They never really call her that in the film, but I mean that's what I'm gonna call her. But she is very creepy, very intimidating. And I like that we don't really. This is something that I have talked about before, but that I think that a lot of movies kind of get wrong or they overdo. Nowadays in a lot of films, is we get too much backstory, we get too much explanation. Like, look at it, something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We'll just use that as a comparison since these movies are kind of similar. What they're doing now with Leatherface, with this the origin stories and the just over explaining it and over humanizing the character, or doing the same thing with Michael Myers, just over explaining things. That's something I don't really like. So that's a positive I can give to this movie, is I like that they really kind of keep everything mysterious. Like, they give us bits and pieces and that we can kind of piece it together ourselves. But that's what makes it more horrifying, is the thought of the unknown. Like, we don't know why she's like this. We don't know why they live in this house. We don't know, who her family is. Again, we get little pieces of this information and we can use it however we want in our minds, but we don't really get any of that just spoon-fed to us and directly explained to us. So that's something that I really, really liked. And even at the end of the movie, they leave it just wide open for interpretation as to what kind of happened in this house. So that is something I feel like they got 100% correct, and that's something I really like and was very promising, for future films. I'm hoping more movies kind of do that, because again, going back to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's what made it so terrifying, was the fact that we don't know why they're doing this, or where they came from, or how long they've been doing this, and so on and so forth. We get that same thing in this film. We don't know how long she's been there, how old she is, what her real name is, what she looks like. I mean, nothing, and that's fantastic. That's something I really, really enjoyed about this. I also really like I said, there was a lot of scenes that made me pretty uncomfortable, in one way, shape, or form. It wasn't anything that really just kind of freaked me out necessarily, but it was stuff that I saw and I was like, ugh, that's gross, which is what I want, out of a movie like this. And that's one thing I can say, in total, is this movie is not as visceral as I was expecting. Like, it's not as gory and violent as I was really expecting it to be. And that's just something that I can give this movie, is that it really invoked kind of those same feelings that I got from watching, again, something like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It made me ask those questions, and it made me wonder, and it made me piece those kind of things together for myself, and that's something I really, really appreciate. So now I'll kind of move on to the things that I just didn't care for, and some of these are kind of little minor complaints or more like nitpicks, and I might even change my mind about this, later on in on a second viewing of the film. So, the one thing I can say is that the movie is split up into chapters. Like, we start out with chapter 1, and then we get chapter 2 through, I think there's 7 chapters it breaks up. I don't know why they chose to do that in this movie. It's not something that really takes me out of the movie. They kind of just use it for cuts, sort of. Like, they'll cut to chapter 2, and then, it'll pick up directly where that left off. And I just kind of felt that was really unnecessary, and again, it wasn't something that really took me out of the movie. That's just more of a minor nitpick, and I was like, why are they doing that? Like, it wasn't a big deal. It was just something that I noticed that I was like, that's odd, especially if you're going to break it up into 7 fucking chapters. I didn't get it personally, but that was just something that didn't really, again, it didn't take me out of it. I was just like, why are you doing that? Like, that, it just didn't really make a lot of sense to me why they broke it up into chapters like that. The other thing I didn't really like about this movie is there's a middle section when Dolly first gets Macy. And like I said, whenever they go back to the house, it's very, there are several scenes that made me very uncomfortable, just in kind of a gross sort of like, ugh, like what the hell, just little stuff, that she was doing, like when she gave her the baby bottle, that was really gross, or when she tried to kind of breastfeed her, that was really gross as well. But that little middle kind of section felt very it felt like it dragged a little bit for me personally. I was just kind of sitting there waiting for, like, where, and it almost gave me that kind of feeling of like, where are we gonna go from here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is this gonna be the whole movie? Like, or what are we gonna do? After this point, like, is this really, like, what is this? Like, what is going on? So that was just another kind of minor thing. Of course, it does kind of pick back up, and we do just spend most of the film in this house. Which I don't mind, because again, the house is really creepy, and I like kind of looking around and piecing kind of stuff together for myself. So, but that just little middle kind of part where she first gets to the house, I was just kind of like, what are we doing? Like, what are we gonna do with this? Another thing is, at the very beginning, and again, this is kind of a big spoiler, Sean William Scott is attacked, like, kind of at the beginning of this movie, right before Macy is taken, and it doesn't really give us a lot, in that first kind of kill necessarily, but the only thing that really I didn't care for about that is, one, he's not killed. And it's not really that I wanted to see Sean William Scott get killed, but they bring his character back later in the movie just to then be killed. And he doesn't really do anything. Like, all it does is it gives like a little, like, moment of levity between the two characters, where she kind of has a few words with him, and then Sean William Scott is ultimately killed in a less than I don't really want to say less than desirable way, but it's very kind of lackluster. So I was like, why didn't you just kill him in the beginning of the movie, and just kind of leave it at that? Like, we didn't really need him to come back, and we didn't really need to, that it would have been fine if he had just been killed right away, like when we thought he was killed. So that was something that was kind of odd to me, that I was like, why did you do that? And so I don't know. That was just something that really, not really bothered me, but I was like, I just felt kind of like it was a little bit of a waste of time. Another thing that I thought was a little bit sort of wasted, but was kind of better, than the whole thing with Sean William Scott, is when Macy is taken to the house, there is someone else in the house, and I like kind of what they did with that, as far as the guy who Dolly is, the other guy who Dolly is keeping chained up in the house. He's kind of a piece of shit, and he takes Macy hostage, and he's kind of acting worse than Dolly is in a way. That one kind of fell flat too for me. That just didn't really, it just felt kind of wasted. Like, I was like, why did we do this? Like, again, it was just again, a minor sort of nitpick, but I saw it coming too. That was the thing, is they tried to kind of surprise you with that, and he does give us a little bit of just a little bit of backstory as to what's going on. Not much at all, but I felt like that whole thing was kind of wasted just a little bit. They could have done just a little bit more with that. I don't know what exactly, but I just felt like it again fell a little bit flat, on that side of things. And speaking of him, when he is killed, that's another thing I said earlier, is there's not a whole lot of kills in this movie, but usually when we get them, they've been practical effects. The kill of this guy who is trapped in the house, that Macy sets free and she thinks is going to help her escape. When he is killed, all of the kills have been very kind of realistic and sort of grounded in reality. His kill is the one that I was like, okay, that was a little too much. Like, you didn't really have to do that, and basically, it that kind of took me out of the movie a little bit, and I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was a CGI effect, if I remember correctly. Again, there was a major storm last night, so my memory is a little fuzzy on this, but from what I remember, I think that's the first kind of use of CGI, very gratuitous use of CGI in this movie, from what I recall. But that scene didn't really do it for me. I was like, why did you have to add that kill in there? You could have killed him in a completely different way, and it still would have been effective. Like, you could have done it any other way, but the way that she kills him, just really, I'm like, why? You didn't have to take it that far. It just made it a little bit more unbelievable, where, again, the rest of the movie seemed sort of very grounded in reality, which, that kind of took me out of it. That was something I didn't really didn't really care for, and just kind of, sort of bugged me a little bit. But I don't know. That was, again, just minor nitpick there. And like I said, as far as the practical effects goes, they might have been practical effects enhanced with CGI. Like I said, I don't remember exactly. I'm remembering them as mostly practical effects, but I could be mistaken. I'll say so. Don't quote me on that, but that's just my memory. What I'm remembering from watching it last night. And then kind of the last thing that really kind of, that I just wasn't crazy about is at the end of the movie, I feel like the ending falls a little bit flat. It's kind of anticlimactic, which doesn't really bother me in a way. The ending just, I'm not going to say exactly how it ends, but just the way that it ends leaves a lot of stuff just kind of open and kind of confusing, which, again, isn't really a bad thing necessarily. It's just kind of, we don't really get a lot of resolution, I feel like. And again, that's not really a bad thing. That could also be, like I said earlier, they leave a lot of stuff kind of unexplained and open to interpretation. That could also be kind of viewed as a good thing, but just the way that they did it in this movie just kind of fell a little bit flat for me. It just didn't do it exactly. And there's also a scene kind of towards the end where Macy's trying to escape, and she kind of meets this park ranger, and that kind of opens up a door for something that I was like, is this going to be all in her imagination? Kind of like he has one line, and there's just one little scene, that I thought was odd, and I'll talk about it more in depth if I actually do a review of this eventually, which I'd like to. But anyway, that scene was kind of odd too to me. Again, I'll kind of talk more about that another time. But so that's kind of that. Those were some of just my minor gripes. Again, they were not things that just killed the movie for me, because overall I did enjoy this movie. I had a good time with it. It was more or less what I expected. The only thing I really kind of wanted was, I did want just a few more kills in this movie, and again, I wish they would have kept them a little bit more grounded in reality, like, because all the rest of them are. It's just that one kill kind of right there, in the middle of the movie with the other guy that's chained up, that really just kind of didn't do it for me. I mean, it was brutal and it was awesome, don't get me wrong, but at the same time I was like, you didn't have to go that far with it. But again, overall, this movie was a good time. I liked it a lot. This is one I will definitely be picking up on Blu-ray as soon as it gets a Blu-ray release. I try to get anything. I kind of already knew that I was going to probably pre-order this as soon as it got announced. Whenever it does, as of today at least, there's still no like Blu-ray announcement, but I know it's kind of in the talks and in the works. So it's one I definitely plan on pre-ordering as soon as I can. But again, it was a good time. I wouldn't recommend this just to anybody, but I would say like movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or a lot of those kind of old school sort of 70s style movies, something like that. I would definitely recommend this, to someone like that. If that's kind of what you're into, because that's definitely a big, plus side for me. Is I love that it was, again, kind of a love letter to that era of films, because that's really a time. A time for movies that I really, really enjoyed. So, if that's kind of your thing, definitely go and check this out. I will absolutely be doing a review of this at some point or another. It may not even be till next year. I don't know at this point. It just depends on when I get the Blu-ray and when I decide to watch it again, because I do want to watch it again, but I'm probably going to wait until I can actually get a Blu-ray or a DVD or something, so that it's a little bit fresher, because I don't really like watching movies just back to back. I like to kind of give it a little bit of time in between, so that I can go into it with not just a fresh set of eyes, but sort of fresher than watching it just back to back. I'll say that. I like to give it just a little bit of time, so that maybe I can see things. And I don't know, on my second viewing, my opinions could completely change. But I mean, for the most part, this is a good movie. I really did like it. Definitely one that I did enjoy, and I do plan on watching again at some point in time. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this first impressions of Dolly. Like I said, definitely go and check this out if you get the chance. Like I said, as far as I'm aware, it's only kind of on Shudder right now, and then of course you can like rent it on Amazon Prime or like Apple TV, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But either that or pick it up whenever it comes out. If you're a physical media collector like myself, stay tuned for the next episode. I do have a review for something coming pretty soon. I'm not going to say what it is just yet. And as always, have a great night and goodbye.